And we are live, and hopefully we'll have a few people join us. Let's see who joins. Takes a bit of time sometimes just for people to link up.
Absolutely, yes, it does, and it is always just good practice to wait a minute or so at least.
Yeah.
We find
okay,
that
we've got some people joining. Yeah, we've got some people joining. So
cool.
We'll just wait a little minute, and maybe some more people will join us. Welcome. Another person has joined. Welcome. Let us know where you're from, if you don't mind. I'd love to welcome you properly. You can just share that in the comments with us. All right. I'm going to kick off, and as people join, we can just maybe reiterate a few things. So welcome to those that have joined us. My name is Karen Doyle. I'm the owner of Ambit Recruitment. Ambit Recruitment has been around for the past 20 years. And tonight I am really thrilled to say welcome to Paul Byrne. Paul is the head of data insights and customer success at Stepstone Africa. And he is going to chat to us about the data on salary disparities in South Africa, the salary disparities between men and women. So welcome, Paul. Lovely to have you.
Thank you, Karen. I am delighted to be here, and such an important topic for us to be able to discuss. So thank you for the opportunity and the invitation to join you this afternoon.
Fantastic. I see more people who have joined us. Please let us know where you're from. We would love to know. In the meantime, I'm going to kick off. Paul, I want to sort of, first question is, from the data that you've seen, because this is what you do data, what are the biggest gaps between men and women's salaries in South Africa? And how do these compare across industries or job levels?
I think if we start right from the beginning, and what we've tried to do here over a number of years, we've had a look at these discrepancies just to see, to put a stake in the ground and to see if things are changing. And at the outset, one of the first things that we do before we even start looking at salaries is having a look at just the gender divide in terms of the gap within management structures, within our place of work, and seniority levels. And it's been quite interesting in this particular set of data that we've got, which is looking back at the last 5 years to see what changes we've been able to pick up. And on one side, there is some positive movement, so in other words, in the right direction, where we look at middle management roles. There's been sort of almost a balancing in terms of the volume of men versus women in that type of role. And I say balancing is not quite equitable yet, but we're looking at about 46, well, not about, we're looking at 46% of our workforce in middle management roles are female. So it's not where it needs to be at the very minimum 50%, but 46% is better than where it has been in the past. The issue that we see kind of kicks in as we move up this level of seniority, because what happens is we get into senior roles, senior management roles, that 46% that I speak about drops to 40%. And then again, we see a further drop into executive roles. And that 40% drops to 37%. And that's where we've got this problem. And it's a problem that I'm sure we'll get into on a number of different levels. Specifically, if we're talking about what are the opportunities for
Paul, you're lagging a bit there. Can you just repeat that for us?
For women specifically in the workspace. Are you back there? Yes,
yep,
I can see you again. We had a blackout there.
Okay.
You're back.
If you can just, just repeat
what I was saying
for us.
Yeah. So I think we got the gist of what I was saying in terms of how, as we climb the ladder of seniority within the corporate workplace, so we see the participation of women dropping down to 37% once we get up to the senior to this executive management role. And I was busy saying that we can get into some of the issues that are causing that. But your specific question was looking at sort of the salary divide, and specifically that we can see that across the board, generally speaking, women are getting paid 27% less than their male counterparts. Now, to find this information, we've specifically looked at Gauteng salaries here in South Africa, and we've looked at people that have got at least 10 years experience, just to make sure that we're doing a like-for-like balance. So that's a big gap. And it's a known gap. We've known this for a long time, that there's not pay parity. And it is something that I think many companies would admit that they need to start to address. Not so easy to address it because obviously the ramp up of the expenses. But yeah, it's going into sort of the specifics of what it is that we can see around your general managerial roles. A manager with 10 years
I've lost you again a little bit. Are you there? We've got a horrible connection, I think. Sorry about that, folks. Paul, you're really lagging. Can you hear me?
FMCG retail and wholesale space. Again,
Paul?
finance managers in the sector of 14%.
Sorry, we lost you again there for a minute. Can you just go back? I don't know. The connection is not great. Can you just go back and just, when we're talking about how do we get, that 26% up, and obviously it has an effect on expenses. Could you just talk again from there?
From that one, absolutely, yes, I can. So I was talking about that. I understand that it is a difficult thing to get right quickly because of the add to the expense list. Companies can't afford just to suddenly give everyone such a sizable increase. Although I think many companies are beginning to realize just the importance of why this needs to be done. And I'll get back into some of that detail as well. But what I had started to do before we lost the connection again was just to go through some of the key elements, the key sort of, first of all, managerial statuses and the differences that we've got over there, and then breaking that down into some very role-specific information that we've collected data on. But to start off with, I was talking about saying a manager with 10 years experience in the FMCG retail and wholesale space is where we see the biggest discrepancy. There's about 27% salary difference between men and women in that particular space. So it's sizable. Senior managers and directors in the finance space, again, 10 years experience, Gauteng-based salaries. We're seeing that is slightly better, but nowhere close to being
we have such a horrible connection. I'm so sorry, everybody. Paul, if you can hear me, we're struggling a bit again with your connection. Are you there?
The 27% drops to a 16% difference.
Paul, we lost you again. I'm sorry. The connection seems to be really bad on your side.
I can tell you it's not my side. I'm 100%.
Okay.
I'm in the office.
Are
I'm on
you?
a 100 megabit line,
Yeah,
and
I'm
it's not
also.
going anything wrong.
Yeah, I don't know what it
Um,
is. Okay, sorry.
yeah,
So just go back to the FMCG 27% disparity, and then just
yeah.
go from
So
there.
cool. All right. So I then got into talking about senior managers and directors, also with that 10-year experience, specifically in Gauteng. And in this case, I was looking at the finance sector. And although there's a slight improvement, it's still far from where it needs to be. And the disparity that we're seeing there is 16% against both of those general manager roles. So senior managers, directors, finance space, 16% down. And then where we see other big issues when it gets into the operational roles, things like operations managers in the manufacturing sector, 18% less for females. Financial managers in the finance sector, 14% less for females. Administrators in the finance area, 14% less for females. But then where we start to see some glimmers of hope specifically come up in finance administrator roles, more entry-level roles, there seems to be a salary parity there. Men and women are getting the same pay. The same happens with sales reps in the FMCG, retail, and wholesale space. Salary parity. Marketing managers in the manufacturing industry, again with 10 years experience, parity. But for me, the big outstanding one, Karen, comes down to accountants. So again, we're looking at the finance sector. Wait for it. Because they're up 30%. 10 years experience, women accountants in the finance sector in Gauteng, starting jobs today, are getting 30% more than their male counterparts. And for me, that's a massive move in the right direction, and for a number of reasons. Okay, number one, it's talking about the importance of bringing women back in to the working world, specifically in that type of role. They are destined to become senior leaders within their organizations. If not, they're going to be starting their own companies. And as we see this shift starting to happen in that type of leadership, I foresee that we'll have a whole lot of other women being employed into that space by these women who recognize the importance of having more women in the workplace. So for me, that's a really, really massively important indicator. So again, I repeat it, it's 30% more than their male counterparts for those people with 10 years experience that are starting their jobs today. So in other words, they're changing jobs.
So how much of the gap do you think can be explained by factors like education, tenure of job function, or how much remains like unexplained or pointing to bias and systemic inequality?
Would you believe me if I said when it comes to the South African sort of framework of employment and qualifications specifically, according to Stats SA and specifically the census that we did a couple of years ago, now released, I think it was October 2023, there are more women in our South African workforce with tertiary with qualifications than men. So post-school qualifications specifically, 12.8% of our women have a post-school qualification, whereas only 11.6% of men, which I found fascinating. And it kind of then also raises the question is to say, well, if that's the case, why aren't we seeing this acceleration of this of more women in these leadership roles? And even when we start looking at the volumes of applications for different jobs, and I'm looking at things like equities, bonds, and derivatives. That's 62% of applications for those jobs over the last 3 years have been by women. And again, bringing up another one, commodities and financial services. 55% applications by women. Technical product specialists, 51% applications by women. So we've seen this definite move towards more women applying for jobs. I think they're recognizing the importance of getting back into the workplace. And I think we've got to recognize that there's skills, the qualifications, the drive to actually make things happen. I want to get there. And we can see that by that volume of applications. So for me, that's very, very positive. So that's three positive things that I've spoken about. Higher qualifications, we're starting to see specifically in sort of the senior leadership roles or potential leadership roles of accountants, the better pay. And we've got more women actually applying for jobs than men in some typically what we might have thought more male-dominated type jobs from the past. So let's hope I'm right, because we need it. And we need it because I think a lot of reading that we have done, you and I have discussed this before, so it comes down to the fact that saying those companies that perform really well in terms of financial performance, generally that outperform their peers, are run by women. It's known that companies that are more innovative have a bigger percentage of women in their workforce, if not led by women.
Yeah.
We know that companies that have better tenure, which is becoming so important in this race for top talent these days, often are run by women or have a bigger proportion of women in the workplace. And those are, again, very, very important messages, because it's so easy for us to actually think about sort of the complications of what has plagued women in the workplace for so long. And there's been, without a doubt, persistent gender stereotypes. Men that are seen as assertive and risk-taking are applauded in the workplace. And yet, if a woman portrays the same kind of traits, she's often seen as aggressive and not a team player. Not fair, is it? We've got workplace culture and bias. Men are often promoted for potential. Women have to prove themselves, which possibly is why when I'm talking about sort of education and that drive to apply for more jobs, we're seeing that happen by women, because men, who knows, might be getting sort of more of that sort of word of mouth opportunities. And let's not forget, I think probably the biggest inhibitor are what we would call your life stage pressures. Women who want to start families, have young kids at home, or have elderly parents that they need to take care of, need a completely different type of work.
We've got a bad line again. Sorry, guys. Paul, are you there? Can you hear me?
With them to support that type of life. You back?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to the audience. I imagine it's very frustrating. So I was talking about those life stage pressures. So saying that's the third thing, that in actual fact is that negative thing. So children, looking after the elderly, taking a career gap. Unless we've got structures within our organizations that accommodate this, which we should have, it means that women are out of the workplace for a period of time, if they choose, if they've got the luxury of being able to be at home to be with their kids and be at the side of soccer fields and do what they need to do in support of the growth of their kids.
I'm gonna quickly. I've got a question from Zoe. Thank you, Zoe. And I think I'm going to ask it now because it's relevant. So she says, do you find that there are roles more suitable to women, or women more in demand in certain industries for legislative requirements that is pushing up the salaries offered?
Legislatively, not necessarily. I mean, we've definitely got what we would call the pink jobs, the female jobs versus the male jobs. But we're starting to see some changes within those two. So nothing legislatively to answer Joey's question. But if I look at percentages, your beauticians, your childcare professionals, your secretaries, payroll and wages within HR, they're all sitting at the region of about 84 to 88% sort of women in those type of roles, meaning the balance are your men, your therapists, your staff recruitment and selection, 78%, nursing and professional caregiving, 78%, travel agents, 78%, hairdressers, 77%. Where we do start to see some interesting data coming in is if we reverse it and say, right, okay, let's look at these male-dominated roles and what percentage of women are in those roles is an interesting one. And things like roles like tool and die makers, which, by the way, I see as a profession that's going to outlast all of the AI changes that we're going to have in our workplace because of the need in mechatronics and whatever the case may be for us to continue to deliver and develop tools and molds and whatever the case may be. 89% male, which means 11% female. So really good to see a proportion of females coming into that. Industrial machinery installation and repair, same thing. similar number, 88%. Machinists, 84% male, that is, so 16% female. Home appliance installations, 81% male, 19% female. Metal, iron, steel, and rebar works, 80% male, meaning 20% female. So definitely we're seeing that there's a different type of mix coming in, and I think that's a good indication. And then if I pull out some other data that we've got, I think it's also quite interesting as we look at, and again, in answering Joey's question, what is it that we've seen over the last number of years? And here I'm looking back prior. This is some old, as I'm looking back further data, what happened before August 2018 and what's happened after August 2018. So we've built sort of quite a long period over there to say, can we see in historically male-dominated occupations where there's been an increase in female professionals over the years? So mining inspectors, 7 years ago, 6% of those were of those roles were held by females. That's up to 13% today.
Okay.
If I look at electronics engineers, 8%, 18% now. Really good to see that one. And again, so important into our future world of work and mechatronics and everything that we talk about today.
Have you got anything on IT? Have you got anything on IT, on software developers?
Not software developers in terms of the historic stuff, but I have got an IT. I can say your project administrators and project managers, 30%. 7 years ago, now 39%. So starting to see that balance getting a little bit better. And then I think two other ones that are worth mentioning: industrial engineers, 26% to 38%, and architecture, 24% to 31%. So good to see in some of the core sort of old professions that we're starting to see this balance rectify.
Yeah. So he also says women are in a better position to negotiate when there is a bigger demand to balance previously male-dominated roles. So
yes, they are.
Yeah.
And I think to agree with Zoe, I think that is why we're going to see some big changes coming, and why I get so excited about what I spoke about right up front in terms of those accountants coming into the workplace, because they are going to be the drivers of change. The slow drivers of change probably take a generation. But if we look at what's actually happening in the workplace today, there are so many structural changes that are happening in terms of the way that we operate, whether it's technology, whether it's geopolitical turbulence, whether it is whatever, just economic shifts. We're seeing there's a lot at play. And probably if we sort of umbrella everything around just skill shortage, we're going to see that we're going to be forced into playing in this global economy. And we've learned over the last years since COVID that mobility and the opportunity to operate remotely are continuing to grow. And very interestingly, in some data that we're about to publish, and so you're the first to hear this, is that we've seen post-COVID, the volume of roles in South Africa that were advertised as remote opportunities or hybrid had started to dwindle until the beginning of this year. And the last few months, we've seen an uptick again. It's a small uptick. It's only 0.5% upwards again, but it was definitely following the global trend of going back to work. And suddenly there's the swing again. And I think what we're starting to see is more and more companies are recognizing the importance of the talent that we've got here in South Africa, and they're looking to see how they can benefit from that, either, unfortunately, through brain drain or through what they would call their offshoring. Here for finding people here that in South Africa continue to deliver.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I'm definitely seeing a lot more companies going remote again. Sort of a mix, but I think some companies seem to not like the model. They want hybrid or on-site. I understand it, but I sometimes feel that it's more of a need to control than the actual reality that people won't do the work, because I see the offices, the companies, and it works so well.
100%. Let's touch on that for a moment, because I think it's a very interesting topic, and I've got mixed feelings about it. My own preference is to be at the office. I've been at the office every day this week, although I don't need to be. I'm lucky that I've got flexible work. I'll probably work from home tomorrow, but that's because the team that I work with closely is not going to be in the office tomorrow. And the point that I'm making is that I find that when I'm at home and working remotely, I'm so efficient. But when I'm at the office amongst the teams of people that I work with on a regular basis, we're that much more effective. We can get things done. So you've got this balance of efficiency versus effectiveness. And personally, my personality style is such that I prefer to be around people. So I find it very lonely to be at work. I don't, given the opportunity at home, given the opportunity, I actually would rather be at the office. But I'm reminded every time I'm here just how
I think it depends on the industry. Yeah, I mean, I'm referring to software developers mostly.
Sure, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and if you go into that particular realm over there, very much so. I mean, if we look at a total at the moment, and if we group all remote jobs, there's probably about 3% of the jobs advertised across South Africa. But if you then literally carve out the software developers and a couple of other IT roles, that percentage jumps up to 13%. So it's significantly higher. And I think that will continue. I think we're going to maybe even see that accelerate because we did see it accelerate a little bit over COVID as more and more demand came in for the type of skills that we could provide to overseas companies. And going back to Zoe's point about the power of negotiation, we're entering into this world where skills are going to be in such short supply that companies are going to have to be thinking very differently about how they attract the right talent, to convince them that what that company is offering is right for that particular person. And there's so many facets.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you there. It's so interesting because Zoe is just saying exactly that in the messages. She's saying when you're looking for talent and the role can work from home, it's worth compromising. And it's easier to juggle other responsibilities with working from home, which is also a negotiation point. So it says their finance ladies took salary sacrifices not to work 9 to 5 in the office.
Yeah, and there are two benefits of that, aren't there? Because immediately, yes, it's a salary sacrifice, and I don't know the extent to what that was, but there definitely are cost savings in not having to come into the office all the time. And I'm thinking transport costs. But going back to your point earlier, Karen, in terms of the sort of the potentially bosses want to watch their staff, that they're getting their money's worth out of people at work. It's the world's changing, and I think what we have seen is that again through COVID, we've got to trust people that they'll get their jobs done. And if we get into sort of the mentality of the gig economy, which we know is massive overseas, and I see coming down the line here at some point in the future into South Africa, we're going to have to rely on output based. What is it that I'm expected to deliver by when, and can I do that? Those people that can actually promise their deadlines, stick to them, and deliver good work are going to be the ones that are going to get the right references, the right acknowledgements, and continued employment. So we've got to start thinking differently. I think 9 to 5 was a concept that was fine for a period of time, but specifically now as we get sort of the new generation coming into the workforce, and Gen Z, let's say specifically, they've got a very different mindset in terms of how things should work. And lifestyle becomes important, and it's been quite interesting for me as an old guy now, also to start thinking about, from just the way that we've lived our lives, people of our age. It has been 9 to 5, 9 to 10, whatever, 9 to 6, 7, 8, long hours sometimes during the weeks, and sometimes sacrificing off time and holiday time because work demanded that we be available. And this was before we had the always on concept of the scourge of mobility, of mobile devices. But it got me thinking to say, well, if there is that expectation, how do we counterbalance it? Because now I can't switch off. It's very difficult. Now there's no ways that we'd be able to actually take a sabbatical, in many of us, in terms of the way that we might have been able to do a few years ago when, and I'm talking maybe a generation or two ago, where people could say, right, okay, I am taking 3-6 months off or whatever, and knowing my job would be there. Things move so quickly that doesn't exist anymore. So how do we actually bring this balance into life so we can enjoy the life's experiences, especially as we expect that we're going to be working until we are a whole lot older, and maximize that, both as men and women. And change up the way of work to say, actually, The benefit I'm looking for is to be at the side of the soccer field to watch my kids playing their games of soccer or cricket or whatever the case may be. And you know what? I'll work later this evening to catch up on what it is. And we've got to look at that way. And that mobility, that flexibility is going to become very, very important.
Another quick question from Isabella Mkonto. She says, what factors shown in the data increase female potential outside, female earning potential outside of tertiary qualifications? Paul, are you there? I think we've lost you again. Oh dear. I think we've lost him a little bit. Let's just see. Paul, are you there? Can you hear me?
I am.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, you're back. All right.
Cool. Please repeat the question. I didn't get it.
Did you get that question?
I didn't.
Okay. What factors, can you hear me? Okay. What factors shown in the data increase female earning potential outside of tertiary qualifications?
That's a very good question. And not one that I've got a data answer to. So I've got to think about this, because in terms of some of the stuff that we know, and in some other sort of press releases that we've done where we've spoken specifically to women, and got their opinion in terms of what's needed to get ahead. I think probably networking. It's important for all of us, but I think there are so many different types of networks that are in this world of ours, with family networks, friendship networks, professional networks, peer-related networks. We've got to kind of identify and segment those different networks into what's going to work for us in terms of a proper plan around what we need to get ahead at work. And by we, talking women, I suppose men equally. So I'm thinking from my own perspective here, as much as trying to answer the question. But those networks become really, really important, because in a lot of cases, people can guide, people can definitely steer you in a different direction, and word of mouth still becomes or it still is a very important part of sort of just getting notification of different types of opportunities. Part and parcel of that network, though, comes down to things like mentorship. And funny enough, I was having this conversation this morning about the importance of that, and just saying how every company in the future, I believe, will have some form of coach that would be able to support people through both their ups and their downs. So in other words, celebrating successes and being there for people to say, that was absolutely fantastic. But at the same time, to be the, that safety net in terms of things are not going right, trying to get into the understanding of what in actual fact could be going wrong. And I see those companies that put those kind of structures in place and help people and are intentional in terms of growing talent. Those are the companies that are going to create opportunity. They're the companies that are going to get ahead in the future, because that kind of stuff becomes like self-fulfilling as a prophecy.
We lost you there again a little bit. Are you there?
They become very attractive to work for because they've got these support infrastructure. Okay, we're back. It's like every few minutes, that's like, it should be an ad break, and the next time we need to push a button so we can get an ad.
I'll have to organize ads for the next one.
No, technology it's our best friend and it's our worst friend. We were laughing recently as it just fails us at the worst possible times, and this happens to be one of those times. So I don't know what's going on.
So there's another little comment from Dukozo Sitole, and she says, I've seen firsthand how hard it can be for women to get recognized and compensated fairly in the workplace. We're making progress, but there's still a long way to go. She says, I'm curious, what do you think is the most important thing women can do to advocate for themselves and get the recognition they deserve in terms of salary and opportunities?
I think it's portfolios of evidence. Build up every time you get a compliment, every time you deliver a great piece of work, make sure that you're just keeping those records, because like I said earlier, men, unfortunately, in this particular context are recognized if they've got potential, if they seem to be ambitious. Women still need to prove themselves. And I think with that portfolio to say, that's what I've done, it becomes at least the part and parcel of that process. Getting those networks, I think, is also really, really important. And we've had some interesting things I've seen over recent times. We've done it at work ourselves, is actually having sort of executive, not coaching, but mentorship to very specific skills, to say, how can we open pathways of growth for people that we can see have the potential to actually get up to a different rung of the ladder. Well, forget the rung of the ladder, build the lattice of their career and potentially work across different skills and different environments, because that's the way I see the world going today. So tapping into a network like that, tapping into a mentor like that, where you can say, listen, I've done these things, help open up that pathway for me. It becomes a very, very strong thing. And it takes a lot of trust, a lot of courage to be able to do that. But I think, to be honest, I was asked to do it at one stage, and it opened up our eyes both ways in terms of what is needed to help someone grow. And if you think about our role in sort of senior working life, it is about making sure that we're helping other people get to the roles that they need to be in and opening up those opportunities. So to answer that question, I would look for who's that person that could in actual fact offer you that guidance, that support, and open up those gateways. You've got to be clear on what you want. You can't go in and say, well, I'm a quick learner or whatever the case may be. You've got that portfolio of evidence. You know the direction you're taking within your career. Now go and find that person that can actually open up the gateway for you. That's part of a network. It's just using it in a very different way.
Yeah. I want to just talk about comparison with the rest of Africa and, let's say, Europe. I don't know, about the US, but how do we compare in terms of, it's a hard question, but in terms of the gender pay gap in South Africa, how does that compare with other African countries and maybe regions like Europe? Are we behind? Are we on par? Are we closing the gap? Where are we? Do you know?
I don't know is the honest answer, Karen. The data that I've got access to looks specifically at the South African market, because that's where our platforms and the data that we've got access to comes from. So to compare it statistically, I can't do. But what I do know is that there's just there is this continuous conversation about the disparity that exists world over. So I can't imagine it's too dissimilar anywhere else, apart from there are pockets again of which I was talking about earlier, where we can see that real performance indicators are different for those companies that are women-led and they've got that greater participation of women in senior leadership positions. At the end of the day, they're driving a different dispensation. And we like that. I think we like the strong comment here, because I realize I do from where I am come from a position of privilege, but we're starting to see that diversity, equity, and inclusion is becoming such an important topic within our environments, of saying, how can we actually improve all of ourselves by the collective good? And making sure that we've got diverse opinions, diverse experiences, all coming into the workplace that help us think differently. Whether it be gender, in this case, I'm talking even race, it becomes a very, very important conversation. I think we are ahead of the world over there, but with a long way to go in terms.
Are you there, Paul? We just lost you there again for a second. Are you there? I'm sorry, everybody. We'll get back in a second with this lag.
even all these years after election. Okay, I'm back.
You're back. Do you want to backtrack a bit and just repeat that?
Thanks for the ad break. No, I think I got it all out. I saw it as we were closing, and as the signal was starting to spin over there. But just the most important thing there is that I think we're acknowledging that diversity, equity, and inclusion is the way forward. And there are only small groups of companies that are getting it right so far. If I'm talking on the global platform, there's a long way to actually go. But those that are getting it right are getting it properly right, and they are really showing the potential of what's important here.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I've seen as a recruitment consultant over the years how a lot of people have left South Africa, and I speak to a lot of those people. They're highly skilled, and generally, I'm talking more about the IT sort of industry. But it seems that it's quite difficult for South Africa to compete with the packages that those people receive. So it's not just the financial reward, it's the fact that they will pay for their child's schooling. They send a whole office furniture combo to their home because they've got to work from home. Little things like that. And it whereas here in South Africa, people are still worried about medical aid and pension and those things that they should be taking care of themselves, and not looking at different kind of benefits that make people's lives easier. I think there are definitely sort of gaps. But I also think that companies are starting to understand that sometimes people don't want that medical aid because they could be on their husbands or their wives, and maybe they want to choose their own one. They don't want to be with a particular medical aid or so I think that whole sort of discussion is also changing. But I was just wondering because we had a massive brain drain, and I think that is continuing. I don't think we'll ever know the numbers. I don't think the government will ever tell us. But I know what my database says, and it's massive.
It is, and I think it's across all walks of life now. And I think it's and even some global studies that we've participated in shows. I don't have the stats readily available here, but we did some very good work with Stepstone, our parent company, the network, which is an affiliation of jobs platforms that operate across the world, and Boston Consulting Group. And we published it earlier last year, just in terms of global talent mobility. And the numbers were up in the region of about 78% of our young South Africans were willing to relocate abroad, or relocate. And there were two paths that were interesting. On the one side, it was quite alarming that volume of people would be looking for better opportunities, higher pay, whatever the case may be. Got to be balanced with obviously the cost of living across in these in other countries. But what was quite pleasing too was the numbers of people that indicated as much as they would be prepared to go, they'd be prepared to come back as well. And I think there's that, as we call it within the industry, that boomerang effect. Sometimes we've got to let people go to actually develop skills, learn sort of international or gain international experience, come back with fresh ideas, creative ideas they can launch from South Africa. I do think we're in, on one side, we're in a good position because I think the quality of life here is amazing. But on the other side, I think that the salaries and the perks that can be offered overseas, as you correctly said, are quite enticing. And it's always that balance of what's important. And I think going back to our earlier conversation, again, Gen Zs in particular, that want that flexibility, they want the quality of life, they want a little bit more of balance. They're going to look quite seriously in terms of the better locations to live in and to work in, and what those locations might mean for their professional life. But it's an interesting one. For me, going back to the report that we did with the Boston Consulting Group and the network, it was pleasing to see how many people were prepared to come back to South Africa.
Great. And what was
the reality is,
is there a percentage to the ones that?
Again, I don't have the data on hand, Karen, and I would have to look it up. If I can find it while we're talking, I will let you know. But
no, that's fine. That's fine. I just thought if you had it to your hand, no problem. Well, I think it's an interesting discussion and debate always around what is happening for women in South Africa.
Absolutely.
I think women, we've been conditioned since childhood often not to speak out, not to ask. And that's something that we need to change, a lot of us. I think a lot of the younger generations certainly moving out of that, and I think that's very encouraging.
It is.
But I look forward to really working with women during this podcast series to help them really understand how to negotiate better. I sit and do interviews every day, and I always say to women, because I advocate very strongly amongst women, and I try and teach them salary negotiation as we interview. And I always say to them, your male counterpart has no hesitation in asking for what he wants. And in fact, he always hedge higher because he knows that there's going to be a middle ground. And women will sort of, they'll typically say whatever is market related, or they'll laugh and say, I hate this. I really don't know, and I force them to give me a number, and I do it with kindness and gentleness, but I force them because I want them to understand that if they don't stand up for themselves, no one else is going to, and
very much so.
So I look forward. I hope you will tune in for our next one. We are going to be talking to Bongiwe Ndondo. She's the Executive Director of the Hlanganisa Community for Social and Gender Justice. And we're going to be looking sort of more around policies in South Africa and how those are supporting women in parity. I'm just reading a message here from Tukoza. She says, we've been conditioned to believe we need to prove ourselves first before we can be recognized. And I'd argue that makes us more resilient, as we know we have to put in the work. Already a plus. Absolutely. I think those are good values, but I think we raised with, boys are raised to sort of be upfront and, have that confidence.
Exactly.
And so
I think you summarized that by saying what I spoke about earlier is it's men are often just promoted for potential. And again, I make the point that women have to prove that they've got this track record. Which is exactly the comment that's just been made. Got to work hard to make sure that it. But the key thing that came out around the questions you asked earlier is, as I said, keep that track record. Make sure that you're building that portfolio, because that becomes a very powerful thing. And I do believe for men and women alike, it's going to become more and more powerful as we get into a different type of work, where we're going to be really having to rate the ability that we've got. And when we can show skills delivery, the conversation probably changes completely. And again, I go back to the point about gig type work. If we need to deliver on a certain set of skills, and we know that skills are becoming more and more and more and more important, those with the better skills are going to be the ones that get frequently offered the new roles or the different projects or the career advancements, or whatever the case may be. It's all about the skills. And it's a mix of skills in terms of the functional skills that we've got, but the behavioral skills are becoming so important as well. Your things like creative thinking, your emotional intelligence, really, really, really important. innovative thinking, that kind of stuff. We've got to make sure that we are actually building those skills, and for those people that have got the opportunity to really start testing them, improving those skills, that's what's going to get us ahead. We've got to, every one of us, be thinking about what the future of work actually means, and be making sure that we put a program in place that's going to get us the places that we want to go by taking the responsibility ourselves. Companies aren't going to do it for us. As much as we'd like to believe that we're joining a company for career progression, they are going to give us opportunities to grow within the company, provided we've developed the skills to support that growth. Take on the responsibility yourself. Make sure that you're doing the micro courses, micro learnings, ongoing education, building those behavioral skills around what in actual fact really matters. 5 years' time, the workplace looks very, very, very different to what it is right now. And availability of talent is going to be the biggest question. And we've heard that thing for a long time, the war for talent, the whole adage of the war for talent. It's getting fiercer. And if we continue, women and men, to build up the skills, those of us that have got the right skills and can show that and prove that we've got the right skills and the right softer skills, we're the ones where the employment's going to come to. Yeah. Don't ever forget the importance of that. Ongoing education.
Absolutely. Koza says there's a statement that says you know your worth and add tax. Too often, once we add tax to our value, we're seen as asking for too much, and that's where the real challenge lies. So, thank you very, very much for your time, Paul. I really appreciate it, and I hope we can do this again. Maybe next year we do a catch up on the data, and maybe we can look at how it's changed. That would be tremendous. Fantastic.
We're always doing that. I would love to join you for that conversation too.
That'd be great. Just for everybody else, please join me again next week, Wednesday, exactly the same time. I will post the link on LinkedIn. Join me for my discussion with Bongiwe. And the week after, I'm going to be talking to you about how we negotiate salaries and to help you just to learn those skills. So thank you very much for everybody who tuned in and for your questions. Zoe says, thank you for the insightful information. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much, Paul. And have a good evening, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Bye.